पाकिस्तान को किसी भी तरह की आर्थिक सहायता टेरर फंडिंग से कम नहीं है।
Gentlemen, a very good evening. You're watching the News Night and I'm Deepthi Sachdeva. Remember, India is unleashing a scathing terror dossier. It is a direct strike when it comes to Pakistan's state-sponsored terror empire. And literally, it's an empire. Right from the Lashkar-e-Toiba to the Jaish-e-Mohammed and their cohorts. The names are well known. Everyone knows these names. And the proof this time is damning. Now, post-Pahalgam, you also have Islamabad that has reportedly pumped about 14 crore, and this is a truth, it is not a fake news, about 14 crore into just rebuilding those terror camps in Muridke and Bahawalpur. Remember, those are many of the other terror camps that have been struck by India, total 9 of them. On your screens, you're looking at these two images from Muridke and Bahawalpur, the headquarters of the Jaish-e-Mohammed and the Lashkar-e-Toiba that Pakistan wants to rebuild. And for that, it is already funneling in a lot of money. And now, also armed with a lot of this concrete evidence, what India is planning to do is moving decisively to push Pakistan back onto the FATF grey list. Now, FATF is a financial action task force. On the show tonight, we'll tell you more about it, how it operates, what is the mandate, and why is this grey list such an important thing right now for India and the world? Because this, ladies and gentlemen, is a move that is meant to literally force Islamabad to choose. Either it abandons terror or it struggles for every rupee of that international aid. Like the Prime Minister said, ki ek penny ke liye we will ensure that we force Pakistan. So will the world confront that betrayal? Or once again, you will have the world wanting to look away, like it happened during the IMF, where Pakistan actually walked out with that bailout, in spite of the fact that India has made it very, very clear that this is a rogue state that cannot be given money like this. So what is a question that we are asking on the News Night? I will also introduce our panel of guests. And the critical question continues to be that when it comes to Pakistan, this possibly is a big financial strike that you're looking at. Pakistan will pay for terror. That is what India has made absolutely clear. Let me say good evening to our panel of guests. I do see Saket Mishra, who's an investment banker right now. It's a pleasure and an honor to also have Ashok Sajanhar, who's a former diplomat on the show. And as always, we also have William Butter, independent economic advisor, and also the former professor of economics and the chief economist at Citi and EBRD. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Let's begin by asking first up, Ashok Sajanhar, the straight questions that we will put in focus, because these are straight questions that will help you understand why this story today is important and what is it about India and this big financial strike that we will study in the next few minutes. The FATF news, is that real when it comes to the terror state Pakistan? Will that actually happen, or will we see the FATF also buckling under pressure? This brings us to our second straight question. India's dossier. Remember, there is a dossier that India is working on, and multiple dossiers have been given, so no two bones about that. But the point is, will that force action? Will we see the world? Will we see the agencies taking a note? This brings us to our third straight question now, that is on your screens. What about the world? Because India has made it very clear that whether anyone supports us or not, we are fighting this good fight against terror. But what about the world? Can the world still ignore Pakistan's complicity? And what about right now India's 33-country outreach to suffocate Pakistan? Remember, there is already result coming in. We've heard an important statement coming in from Germany, and I'm going to tell our viewers about that in just a moment. This brings us to our fifth final straight question right now. What about China? Because people talk of the elephant in the room, but this is the dragon in the room. Will we be able to talk about China? Isn't the onus on China? And what about the US? Will the US also act? Or US, being self-centric as it is, will want to look the other way? I also now do see Rajat Sethi, and good evening to him. He's also a columnist and a political analyst joining us. Ashok Sajanhar sir, let's begin by asking you, What do you think? We've seen the IMF literally giving Pakistan that dole, but what about the FATF? Do you believe that there is good enough evidence this time around and the world has to take a note?
Yeah, thank you very much, Deepthi, for having me on the show. You asked some very, very interesting and important questions. Now, you said, how is FATF going to react? Let's face it, FATF is not as much an institution in itself that it is comprised of all these many states, countries which come together. And they take decisions, whether a country is to be put in the grey list or black list or has it to be removed from there. And what do these countries really act upon? They act upon their own interest. They act upon, whatever in terms of geopolitics, the way they are able to view it and the way they are able to witness it. So we have, countries like you mentioned, two countries. You have countries like China, you have countries like the United States, and you have many other countries. Now you would see that, some of these countries, and particularly as far as FATF is concerned, if more than 2 or 3 countries, they oppose the listing of any country in the grey or the black list, then it is not accepted. So, it's a very, very high bar that you have to achieve for getting any country covered under the FATF. So really, it will depend upon, India and the likes of India who feel that, there has to be zero tolerance as far as terrorism is concerned. And I think what Dr. Jaishankar has gone out, what these 33 countries that you mentioned, I'll be very happy to discuss about what will be the motivations of China, what are the motivations of the United States, because you see the sort of commentary that has been emanating from the United States after this 4-day conflict between India and Pakistan. We can discuss that. But the bottom line there is countries will act according to how they perceive their own geopolitical interest.
Absolutely. So, we will touch upon both China and US in just a moment. Let's get the opening comments from everyone. And also, as Ashok Sajjanhar was speaking, on our screens, you're looking at more details. For those of you wondering, what is this FATF? What does it do? What is the mandate? What is the importance of this grey list? And what is the Pak connection to the FATF? Because you would look at the entire timeline, how Pakistan was into that list, then it moves away from that list. And right now, remember, just in one line, the news point is that India wants to ensure that Pakistan goes back to the grey list of the FATF, because this is where the real choking of Pakistan will begin. You've seen the Indus Water Treaty, you've seen a lot of their terror bases hit. But Rajat, why is it that the world today is not willing to listen to India? I mean, in spite of so much evidence on the table, how many more people need to die? How many more dossiers do we need to give to the world?
I think it's such an important question, and it stems from biases. It stems from a complete lack of understanding of the issue at hand, and it also goes to a level of racism, if I were to say. It is a way with which the West sees a cultural or a civilizational state like India as if it's on the 180-degree opposite to their ways of life and their ways of thinking, that they have never put in the amount of effort that you would expect them to put in. And I think this is where, mixed with their sense of degrees of biases which come in because of shoddy reportage which happens in the New York Times and the CNN, that they tend to believe that this is no longer about a victimizer. India is the victimizer in this whole case. And I believe this just complicates the whole narrative business for us in multiple dimensions. What we failed, one clear example was what happened in Pahalgam. Pahalgam was a terror attack that happened on India. We were the victim. But look at the global narrative. Look at how CNN and the New York Times and the European media houses portrayed us as if we are the aggressor trying to do aggression against Pakistan. Now, if you do not address this systemic biases, including the IMF, that no matter how hard we try and present the facts, all of these stakeholders tend to ignore those facts and go back to their basic biases, which are, which have condensed and solidified over for decades now. And I think this is where India's exercise of engaging with the world requires a complete reset. We need to find an alternate strategy. We need to find a way of engaging through our consulates and embassies in a whole different way.
Okay.
We have to assume that nobody understands India at all. And with that assumption, we need to kickstart our engagement with the world.
And
I
maybe,
think only then you will
Rajat,
be able to
it's not
convince the
about
World Banks and the
understanding India,
IMFs
it's about
and the
understanding
FATFs
terror.
understand why systemic biases are there.
Absolutely. I think you hit a lot of good points. And I must also say that we do not cry for validation coming in from the West or anywhere else. India has made it very clear that we are going to be fighting our own wars no matter what. We will draw our own red lines no matter what. And we don't want any validation. On your screens, you're looking at all these people who are terrorists. They are right now in Pakistan. Now, Saket, before I come to you, does America, does China not know about what Pakistan is up to? China supplies so many defense armaments to Pakistan. The world is aware. Just recently, there were reports also coming in of 14 crore that has been funneled into rebuilding of the Lashkar-e-Toiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed headquarters after India pummeled those terror bases, Willem. So, why is the world looking the other way?
Well, the world is very bad at confronting terrorism unless it occurs on a country's own doorstep. So I'm sure that both the US government and the Chinese government, which indeed provides Pakistan with 81% of its military hardware imports, that both these governments know that the Pakistani government basically supports these terrorist activists in Kashmir and on the border with India generally. But it's unlikely that we'll see any drastic action. It is true that Pakistan was on the grey list of the FATF from 2018 to 2022. So it's not impossible that they would be put back on. But I think they will want to see a greater urgency, a greater threat to their own security before they will vote to put Pakistan back on the grey list or even on the blacklist. So I'm not optimistic that this will happen anytime soon.
Now, why are you not optimistic? Why don't you help our viewers understand why do you believe that this is so difficult? Why is it such a big ask?
If, say, the World Bank and the IMF, who are two institutions that are currently in focus because they've agreed to increase the loans to Pakistan in the case of the fund by over 2 billion, and there's currently this request pending with the World Bank to make another 10 billion available over 20 billion available over a 10-year period. But I think the reason that the US is reluctant is that they feel if they help cut off Pakistan financially, Pakistan will get even closer to China. And that is something that would worry them from a point of view of geopolitical and military security. Pakistan, like India, is a nuclear power, and they probably don't want to push them to the point that they could engage in providing nuclear resources to Iran or other countries that are striving to become nuclear as well. So I think one has to look at this really from a global political military perspective. This is not just a Pakistani Indian issue.
You know, Willem, I'm so glad that you haven't minced your words. You've been as direct as possible. And I know that Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar would want to come in right there, but I want to get in Saket quickly because he hasn't spoken yet. You spoke of the nuclear blackmail. You know, India, Rajat, has made it very clear that no amount of nuclear blackmail is going to threaten us. So what if Pakistan has nuclear weapons? Rajnath Singh has said, Saket, very, very clearly that can you trust a rogue state like Pakistan with nuclear weapons also? So we need intervention, whether it is the UN, whether it is the IMF, whether it is the FATF, whether it is the IAEA. All these agencies, Saket, cannot be mute spectators to what's going on.
Thank you very much for having me online. I would go with Ambassador Sajjanhar. I think it's slightly more subtle than, merely going and browbeating or trying to convince people. Everybody knows what's Pakistan. It's because China knows that Pakistan is a failed state that China decided not to give them any more money. That's why they went to the IMF. We're talking about $10 billion, but China actually requires $129 billion over the next 5 years. So Pakistan's real problem is a 2T problem. It's terrorism and thuggery. Terrorism because they keep funding it, and because fundamentally the Pakistani establishment, and by that I would say the ISI even more than the military, cannot get itself unentangled from all the various terrorist groups they have spawned. Second is thuggery, and that's one at the political level in Pakistan, because we've got a bunch of politicians who fundamentally keep looting the country or whatever little is left from the army and terrorist activities. They pay 60% of all their GDP is going to be paying interest on their loans, by the way. So out of this 40%, the remainder goes towards politicians and the army. And the politicians take the money, send their kids abroad, and they sit on the money abroad, which leaves Pakistan with the alternative of how do they continue surviving? Because as you said earlier, it's not state-sponsored terrorism. Pakistan is a terrorist state. It is not sponsorship. They don't have the money to sponsor anything. So what Pakistan then does is it carries on all the nefarious activities, whether it's nuclear research, whether it's ballistic missile research, etc., that other nations, I won't name them necessarily, do not want to do in an international scenario. And the reason why, and that's how they earn money. And so they are a renegade state. Now, why would, therefore, a China not, rather than give their own money, countries like China, for them, the easy answer is to stop the FATF and other international bodies from putting any sort of sanctions on China, on Pakistan, which is perhaps what Ambassador Sajjanhar was talking about. It's everybody taking their own view.
Yes.
And the last thing is that Pakistan is a failed state. You have to recognize that, as I said at the start, everybody knows it's a failed state. So the real fear and the nuclear blackmail is not on India. The nuclear blackmail is on the rest of the world. People
No, but
are
Saket,
scared.
are we to believe that the world is so helpless in front of a Pakistan, in front of even their army chief, whoever that person believes that he is, he's got himself promoted to a field marshal. Is the world, Saket, so helpless? No,
world is helpless in the sense that they believe that having an army there is an easier solution versus a broken up Pakistan where nobody knows who has control over the nuclear arms. So we need to look at things in a manner. So India is going to present dossiers. India is going to talk about the truth. The fact is it's a failed state. But guys sitting in the US writing strategy papers will be saying, it's better to have a strong man sitting in Pakistan rather than have 20 guys who we don't know and who we can't control really have control over the nuclear button. So it's real blackmail of a terrorist state.
Okay, I just have the last couple of minutes. I want to squeeze the last comments from every one of you gentlemen. Ashok Sajjanhar, does this mean that, we should just give up all hope? Pakistan can continue to do what it does? Everyone knows what Pakistan is. We can't even declare it a terrorist state, and we can let Pakistan have all the money to put into their terror activities.
Not at all. I don't agree with that line of thought at all. You know, whatever, I quite agree with you. You know, you made that statement twice. India will do what it needs to do, irrespective of what the world thinks about it.
Yes.
That's the bottom line as far as we are concerned. You know, that's the new normal that we have established, and we'll not distinguish between the terrorists and the state sponsors of terrorism. You know, those who are promoting will not. But let me make two or three very quick points. You know, I agree with what Saket has said, what the professor has said. You know, the whole world knows that Pakistan is a terrorist state. You look at the UN Security Council 1267 committee report. More than half the terrorists are from Pakistan. Designated terrorists are from Pakistan. More than half the designated terrorist outfits like Jaish, Lashkar, etc. But different countries have different interests. For instance, as far as China is concerned, good terrorists, bad terrorists. You know, those who are coming after me, those who are coming the Uyghurs, they are the bad terrorists. Those who are going after India, they are good terrorists. So I will support as far as Pakistan is concerned. Pakistan is also a very useful tool for China to sort of, you know, keep on poking and pricking India whenever it wants to. As far as US is concerned, Deepti, you and your viewers will know that when Mr. Modi was in Washington, D.C. on the 13th February, the names of all these terrorist organizations in Pakistan, they were mentioned in the joint declaration.
You're right, sir.
LET, JEM, 2611, Pathankot attack, etc., everything. It's not that Mr. Trump doesn't know, but he's looking at some business deals. Maybe he sees that there are, you know, on the crypto thing, he's got some deal signed with Pakistan. On the rare earth minerals, he's got some deal. I know you are running short of time. This is an issue, you know, that we really need to discuss at great length, and we need to go through what are the machinations. Why is Russia interested that, you know, Pakistan should not go into the list? Because again, you know, in addition to what the professor said, last point here, you know, that this is, as far as the, again, US and Russia are concerned, that there is, it's a big state, 200 million. And if it disintegrates, you know, this is the point that Saket also mentioned, you know, what are the consequences? No one knows the consequences. So it is better to keep it, United States to keep it under its charge rather than allow it to go 100% under Chinese influence.
Okay, you know, there's a lot of merit in what you say, sir. I just have the last few seconds. Willem, first to you. India is on a big diplomatic outreach right now. 33 world capitals are being visited by Indian member of parliament. You think that is a good enough move to also show the mirror to a lot of these powers who are believing in monkey balancing right now?
I'm afraid that the likelihood of meaningful change in attitudes towards funding Pakistan in the rest of the world is very limited indeed, for the reasons that were stated here earlier. But the risk of Pakistan as a nation collapsing is nuclear power collapsing is almost too frightening to contemplate. And so I think countries like the US and the EU, while they undoubtedly strongly disapprove of this support for international terrorism that comes from Pakistan, will not address it firmly and in a way that really would hurt Pakistan.
Rajat, should India be ready perhaps with a plan B, C, D, Z? I mean, we do not know. The IMF loan actually happened. The FATF grey listing, not sure whether it will happen or not. But then India needs to be fighting that rogue state Pakistan, Rajat.
Yes, absolutely. It requires a full throttle approach, 365 days. We should only be dedicating ourselves and our entire foreign affairs bureaucracy with this singular task of presenting and continue to present for some years. There was this momentum that, okay, terrorism is not a global issue anymore. It's only India who's trying to peddle this issue. That needs to be resurrected. And no matter at the cost of sounding repetitive, we will have to do that. And and Pakistan will continue to remain this global errand boy of multiple big powers around the world. It will continue to do the dirty work that the other powers cannot do, which is containing India. Knowing the fact that India's rise would not be seen as palatable for multiple powers around the world, we will have to be self-dependent, self-confident, and confident in our narrative when we engage with the world. I think this exercise of bipartisanship in reaching out to the world is a very interesting experiment. It needs to be seen as to how effective it is.
Yes.
But this exercise of being on our feet all the time, that is what is needed, not just during the time of crisis, but a perpetual engagement on all quarters is what is expected.
Oh yes, this is a job that you need to be on forever and forever, because clearly you can't change your rogue state that is neighboring Pakistan. Gentlemen, only for war of time. But like Ashok Sajjanar said, that this is an issue that we will keep our focus on, and we'll keep here on Newsnight, coming back to all our experts to keep discussing this entire issue and the Russia connection also. Let's also bring Newsnight's parting shot now. Now, it's an open secret that Pakistan funds terror. It shelters extremists. Remember, this is what the world knows. And now it even dares to bankroll their return. Like you've seen Mudrike and Bahawalpur, those camps being rebuilt. And yet you have the world hesitating. But today you also have Germany that has stood up, and that is backing India's right to self-defense. And what is that clear signal? The signal tells you that the tide possibly is turning. It is doing it slowly, but it is turning. So what's really stopping the FATF? If the FATF, ladies and gentlemen, does not act, then who's enabling terror? Will we have an answer to that question? The clock is ticking. The world must choose. The choice is very simple. The choice is just between justice or complicity. Whether it is US, whether it is China, whether it is Russia, Newsnight will continue to keep its focus on that top story. Thank you for watching. Good night.